This week on Africa Weekly, we head to Ethiopia, where a detox centre has been set up to help addicts of Khat, a plant whose leaves give users a stimulating effect when they chew it. Then we visit Madagascar, where an increasing number of people are flocking to evangelical churches, much to the concern of Catholic leaders. But first, let's take a look at the stories that made the headlines this week. The Al-Shabaab militant group claimed responsibility for an attack on a US base in Somalia, as the European Union confirmed a separate attack against a convoy of Italian advisors. Using explosives, the militants hit a US base located 110 kilometres northwest of the capital Mogadishu before opening fire on the compound. The base targeted is a major launch site for US drone operations against the Islamic State in Somalia and Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda-linked group which controls large parts of the country. In a separate incident on the same day, a security official said EU advisors training the Somali National Army were also attacked by a car bomb in Mogadishu. Whilst on a visit to South Africa, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari said the two countries have decided to take concrete measures to prevent violence targeting foreigners in South Africa. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa repeatedly apologised after xenophobic attacks in Johannesburg stirred tensions between Africa's two leading economies. Several hundred relatives of Malian paratroopers demonstrated in Bamako after militants killed at least 25 troops in attacks on the military camps of Bulkesi and Mondoro. Backed by foreign allies, Mali launched a hunt for the missing soldiers after what was one of the deadliest attacks of the 7-year-old jihadist insurgency. Around 60 soldiers were listed as missing, but the Malian army later said that 11 had been returned to their base. Cameroon launched a national dialogue in a bid to end the separatist conflict in the chiefly French-speaking country's Anglophone provinces. President Paul Biya has dropped the prosecution of 333 people linked to the crisis. Nearly 3,000 people have died and 500,000 fled their homes since fighting broke out in 2017 between the army and insurgents, who want independence for Cameroon's two English-speaking provinces. Prime Minister Joseph Dion Ngute called on all participants in the dialogue to be true architects of peace.
These men are all in rehab because of Khat. The plant is known for its stimulating effect, and chewing it is common in Ethiopia, but its consumption can lead to other addictions.
I've been in addiction for the past 15 years but with a lot of addictive substances like shots, like cigarette, like marijuana.
At this state-run rehab center, services are free and patients are encouraged to give up the leafy stimulant, a rare approach in a region where few try to tackle the controversial habit. While banned in many countries, in Ethiopia, chewing Khat is legal and widely seen as a cultural activity. Users sometimes turn to other drugs to dull the plant's amphetamine-like effects.
The whole night they can read. Most of them, they start chewing Khat for reading, for increasing capacity of work, for increasing the performance in study in different works.
In this district of the capital, excitement peaks when a truck full of Khat finally arrives. Many chew it on the street and refuse to believe these leaves can lead to other addictions.
That's not true. The people who say that were already addicted to alcohol and other drugs before they started using Khat.
Often referred to as green gold, Khat is Ethiopia's second biggest export behind coffee, and its domestic consumption is growing. Campaigns by local civil society groups have failed to result in a ban.
Pascaline was once a devout member of the Protestant Church, but when her 11-month-old baby died of malaria, her faith changed. She didn't lose her religion, she simply changed the way she practiced it. After a couple of years, she decided to join the Church of the Apocalypse, one of the country's main evangelical churches. Here, she says she felt the comfort that had been lacking before. She is one of an increasing number of Christians in Madagascar who are turning away from the Protestant and Catholic churches.
For us faithful of the Apocalypse Church, we know that everything the pastor says comes to pass. My second child was gravely ill, on the verge of death. We put our hands together and prayed for him, and my child was cured without any medicine.
One of the most important figures of the Apocalypse Church is Pastor Mayo, a former street trader. He says he experienced a divine revelation in 1991 telling him to found a new church. It was to be based upon Revelations, the final book of the New Testament, also known as the Book of Apocalypse. He claims his church has won over more than 1 million worshippers. Some of this popularity can be attributed to the more relaxed and sometimes comedic tone of his sermons.
Ladies, when you fight with your husband, avoid going near his private parts. Go for other less dangerous parts, but not the private parts.
The pastor encourages the members of his church to give 10% of their income to the church, in keeping with the tithing system described in the Bible. His detractors point to this as a sign of him manipulating his followers.
People have sometimes said, you become rich while the people are poor, and I reply, what about the political leaders who are also rich while the people are poor? What's happened there? And they say, you ask for 10% from the poor. Well, what about the state asking for 20%? What's going on there?
Thanks to the donations of his faithful, the church's coffers are full. And following another vision in 2004, Pastor Mayol has his sights set on building a new church, one which he says God commanded him to make the biggest in Africa.
A priceless 18th century Ethiopian crown is set to be returned from the Netherlands to Addis Ababa after a one-time refugee found it in a suitcase and hid it in his apartment for 2 decades. The ornate gilded copper headgear, which features images of Jesus Christ and the 12 apostles, was unearthed after refugee-turned-Dutch citizen Sirach Ashfar contacted Dutch art detective Arthur Brand. And finally, Sudan's first ever women's football league has kicked off with the first 2 teams facing off at Khartoum Stadium. The match was attended by Sudan's new Minister of Sport, Wala Essam, along with Sudanese and foreign diplomats. The league, which involves 21 clubs, would have seemed unlikely just months ago when longtime Islamist ruler Omar al-Bashir was in power. The start of the Women's Football League comes amid expectations that the current 3-year transition period will see liberal policies implemented across the country. That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.